What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In, and I'm your host, Mason Cameron, at PFF_Mace on Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta, at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. V, it's the big game. We're finally here. The Super Bowl. It's okay. We can say it a couple of times. They're never going to find us here. If anything, Goodell can send me an email. But V, It's been a long season. We're finally here. You excited to break down the big one?
Very excited. I think this is going to be a phenomenal game. Just easily, I think, two of the best teams in the league this year. So it should be a really, really good one. And yeah, can't wait to break it down, and then can't wait to watch the game itself.
Oh, it's been a crazy season. And honestly, I could only imagine that we would luck out and get this type of matchup, a little bit of some bitterness, a little bit of some rivalry from some teams that you don't really see too often. But we're going to break into all the nitty gritty and all the meat on the bones of this one, because there's a lot to break down in this one. Two really, really good teams in the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, ready to do battle. Super Bowl 59. This one's going to be crazy. So let's not waste any time. Let's hop right into it. So we have quite a bit to break down tonight, V. There's a lot going on. There's some history here, like I said. There's a lot of stuff we're going to break into in terms of the stats behind it and who to expect and who you guys should be betting on. But first and foremost, we have to get the normal stuff out of the way first. So what we have here, Kansas City is 1 point favorites, or 1.5, depending on where you're shopping. 1 point favorite. Game total on this game, 48.5. And I believe they're playing in New Orleans, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So they are taking place in New Orleans. So neutral ground. That means that they truly do believe that Kansas City here, -1. A little bit of a shock, I will say. I did not expect Kansas City to be favored in this game, given kind of how close a lot of their games have been this year and kind of how dominant, especially how dominant the Eagles were in the NFC Championship game. But let's break into it. Kansas City, they're a mainstay in this situation, in these big moments. And Super Bowl 59, that marks their 5th appearance in the big dance in the last 6 years. I don't know that I've seen any other team ever even get close to this type of prolonged success as they've had since they drafted Patrick Mahomes. They're the first back-to-back champions to return to the Super Bowl the next year. They're looking to become the first team to ever three-peat. Now, I know that the Packers have three-peated back well before the merger, and that's gotten Green Bay fans on the internet riled up because they think they're the first team. But I'll be honest, frankly, back in the day, that's kind of little league compared to what they're doing now. This is a 32-team league now. There's significantly more games. It is a bigger thing that this team right now, in a sport that has so much parity, continues to dominate year in and year out. Kansas City, though, this has been kind of a miracle season. They have been living on a prayer. They have 17 consecutive wins by 1 score. That is phenomenal. And that actually dates back to last season. They have 11 one-score wins this season. And not just that, V. Not just that. They have 6 of those wins came on the final play of the game. Final play of the game, they got 6 of their wins. That's incredible. This team is literally a breeze away from having a 500 record. So, but that doesn't discount literally how well they've played in something that they've shown all year long in that clutch factor. V, what have you made of this Kansas City team all year long?
Yeah, just a team with a lot of experience playing together, whether it's the players on the field or the coaching staff, just a lot of experience together, and they just know how to execute in the most clutch situations, and they just get the job done. There's just no other way to put it. You go back to their last game in the AFC Championship game against the Bills. A lot of people want to talk about the, reps or the 4th down plays or whatever it was that the Bills got stuffed at. The play that really stands out to me is just that last offensive play where 3rd and 9, have to have it for Kansas City, and they just run this perfect little, crosser to Samaje Perine behind the line, catches it, easy first down, not even a sweat for them because they're just so good at this stuff. They're just so good at executing the small details. They don't have to do anything explosive, anything crazy. They just execute, play in, play out, down in, down out. And that is why they're so good. And, while it seems crazy that they're winning all these, close one score games, you can call it luck however much you want. It's not. They're just better. They're just better at executing, especially when the moment matters. So I think that's just have to give them all the credit in the world because fans of other teams know it's very, very difficult. It's hard to do that, even a couple times a year, let alone doing it consistently every single week throughout the year. So all the credit to Kansas City and that team.
Yeah, 100%. Andy Reid has a play for every down, every distance, every situation, every temperature that the game might be at. He knows how to meet it, and he knows how to call plays with the best of them. And when you have that and you pair it with a excellent signal caller like Patrick Mahomes, who, while Pat hasn't been spectacular this season in terms of his overall production, he has done a really, really good job not making mistakes and not making life harder on this team. And sometimes that's just what you need from your signal caller. So we talk about game managers all the time. Well, Pat Mahomes was a game manager all season long, but he managed them into clutch situations and into wins. And you have to do that in order to be successful in this league. And they do it every single week. They're one of the best coached teams. They execute well and they're clutch. So of course they're sitting here in this situation and they've just been phenomenal. On the other sideline though, Philly's been fantastic and has looked like one of the best 53-man rosters in the NFL this year. They were a little slow to start the year, 2-2 in September, but then that all went out of the window. Rattled off 10 straight wins. They've been phenomenal. They're coming off an absolute blowout of a darling of a team in the Washington Commanders that so many people were rallying behind, and they squashed that in the dirt. And literally, it all comes from what they've been able to do as a team and how this team is better than they were the last time these two teams fought. So for everybody who, has short-term memory loss, kind of like I do in certain situations, this is a rematch of Super Bowl 57. For anybody who does not remember, that was an insane game, an absolutely nutty game, hotly contested. Ultimately, Kansas City comes away with their second title in 4 years. In that game, Philly held a 24-14 lead at half, but they stumbled down the stretch. KC clawed their way back into it. They tied the game at 35 with about 5-ish minutes left in the fourth. And in the end, Kansas City kicks the game-winning field goal, and the rest is history. And now we're back. Now it's rematch time, but this team is a little bit different. They lay claim to, I haven't done all of the research into this to see if anybody could have possibly had this sort of title bestowed upon them either. But I think Saquon Barkley might be the greatest free agency signing in the history of the game. And if they're able to come through, I think that'll be official. And that's also without mentioning that this defense is league leading. They had a 91.1 team defense grade this season. Just to put into perspective how good that is, the next highest team was over 11 points on the grading scale lower. Coincidentally, that defense belongs to the Kansas City Chiefs. So right here, baby, we have a defensive Super Bowl battle, which I don't think a lot of people quite put together when they think about this game, is that this is going to be a defensive battle. V, what do you make of this Philly team all season long? They've been fantastic. They looked really good. They have one of the best secondaries in the league, and they are poised to take out some anger and some vengeance in this one. What do you think about them?
Yeah, just an unbelievable job. It's hard to say you need to have a turnaround after the first month of the season because it's so early and there's so much football still left to play. But I remember vividly us talking about it after going 2-2. They got blown out in Tampa Bay at the end of September, and it was just like, what is this team? They just don't do anything well. There was a lot of concern, not just on the offense but with the defense. A lot of their star players who they drafted very highly were not performing very well. There's a bunch of random guys. At the time, felt random, like Zach Vaughn, who is that guy? I remember saying that on the show, why is this guy one of their best players? I've literally never heard of this guy. And then we fast forward to the end of the season, he is a legit candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. So that's, that one shut me up pretty quickly. But yeah, just a phenomenal job just turning things around, specifically on that defense. I think what they've been able to do with so many of their players, so many of their young players, whether it's on the defensive line with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Nakobe Dean, or in their secondary with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, all those guys just playing out of their minds. And I think that has really been the genesis of this run for them, why they've lost one game since the end of September. And that's when Jalen Hurts got hurt early in the game against Washington late in the season. That's the only game they've lost recently. So just a really, really good job by them. And, they are certainly capable of winning this game. They have all the talent in the world. They probably have the better 53-man roster right now than Kansas City does. But obviously, they don't have Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be a big, big key factor in this one here.
That will be that will be a big key factor, and something that we've talked about this year is that this team, frankly, Jalen Hurts needed to show more, and this team kind of won despite his performance a lot of the time. Yeah. But they're in this situation altogether, and if we look back at some of his performances, he was excellent in the NFC Championship game.
Phenomenal.
And not to mention his best graded game ever as a pro, Super Bowl 57. So he does play fairly well in the spotlight. But as you said, we have a guy like Patrick Mahomes. So let's talk a little bit about some of their betting trends and how good these guys have been, particularly when you see a guy like Mahomes, who is just lights out in the postseason. He's 14-6 against the spread in the postseason, and that's 3-1 against the spread in Super Bowls, including the last time these two teams played in 57. But overall, they haven't been spectacular against the spread this year. Their 47.4% cover rate is bottom half of the league. Not really that stellar, especially when you're finishing under 50%. But one of the things that does have to be said with the context here is that they've oftentimes been sizable favorites, big betting favorites, regardless of the outcome every single week. They would win close games, they'd win one-score games, and the next week they'd still be 6-point favorites. And it's because of how the public bets on them, and because of how odds makers view them as a very well-coached team. They've only been favored by 3 points or fewer 5 times this year, and they've covered every single one of them. So that is a huge plus for them. But if we go on to the other side and we look at Philly's been great in betting markets this season. They're one of the top 5 teams in cover rate, 65%. So pretty good. And they've only been a dog this year 3 times. All 3 of those scenarios, they not only covered, they won outright. And that's a pretty solid thing for them coming into this one. And if we look at some of the history of betting the Super Bowl, I was reading some reports this week about how they were saying historically bet the favorite because the favorite usually wins. And then I went back and looked at that because I was like, that doesn't sound right. And I went back and looked at it. Of the last 20 Super Bowls, 14 were won by the underdog.
Wow.
Or 14 times the underdog covered, excuse me. Maybe not won by the underdog, but 14 times they covered. Yeah. And not to mention that it's a Super Bowl, you're pretty much looking at some very, very tight spreads. So usually if your underdog is winning in a game like that, they're probably winning the game. So when we look at that, and that also includes the last 4. The last 4 Super Bowls, the underdog has covered. So I think that if you guys see some of those headlines pop up on your local, 3 and 4 letter sports networks, go ahead and just take that one with a grain of salt because it's not at all the recent trend in any single way.
Right.
But now we get to break into some of the nitty gritty of this and some of the matchup. I see we lean slightly different ways here from some of our picks.
Yeah.
So I'll start us off here going into some of the things that we've said here. I'm liking Philly on the money line and under 48.5 points. Big reason why is I think Philly's defense is going to play a very key role in this. But there's one caveat. There's one caveat for all you bettors at home, all you degenerate bettors. I'm speaking to you directly. This is a very crucial game that you don't blindly bet.
Right.
You need to go and make sure you're keeping an eye on the news cycle. There's a very troubling bit of news right now of an illness spreading throughout Philly's locker room.
Yep.
As a man who has been hacking up a lung for the last 2 weeks, do not sleep lightly on whatever might be in that locker room. If the news continues to get worse, because right now Jalen Carter was limited in practice. I haven't checked as of today if he was able to make a full return, but this is something you're going to want to watch very closely as we head into kickoff of the game. And maybe if you're an early Philly bettor, you might look to hedge if the news does get worse. But all things considered, on an even field, I do like Philly by just a hair here. And that's really about the talent on the field. The under 48.5 is very simple. This is two of the best defenses in the league. I know that we're looking at some offensive weapons, and we're looking at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and you have AJ Brown on the outside. We've got Saquon Barkley. I think this is going to be a very, very run-heavy game from both teams potentially, and I think that'll limit the number of possessions that we have for both sides. So when we think about that, I think 48.5, it's a bit high. That's honestly a lot higher than either of these teams have gotten most of the year.
Yeah.
And they're one of the teams that kind of end on the lower end of the unders. So that's which way I'm leaning. V, we have you leaning on the side of KC here. Tell me a little bit about what you're targeting and why you're thinking that that's the move there.
Yeah, I'll just be honest. I have been going back and forth on this all week. So this is not
It's
something that I'm like 100% set in stone on. It could very well change by the time we get to kickoff. But in the end, I just had to go with Patrick Mahomes, the guy who just never loses. And to be honest, I think this is a very, very similar matchup to last year's Super Bowl between Kansas City and San Francisco. I feel like San Francisco's team built kind of like very similarly, a lot of superstars on defense, very explosive offense. You love the playmakers that San Fran had on offense last year, but you maybe had a couple question marks about the quarterback just because you weren't 100% sure he could always pull through in the clutch. And that was a game where it was very much a defensive showdown. It was like 10-3 at halftime. The game went to overtime and still went under the game total in that game, where it felt like San Fran was dominating for most of that game. Their defensive line was doing a solid job getting pressure against Patrick Mahomes, something we could see similarly in this game with Philly's D-line being able to get some pressure. But San Fran just made one too many mistakes that kept Kansas City alive. They had that muff punt that gave Kansas City phenomenal field position in the second half that really allowed them to get back in that game. And this is just one of those situations where I trust Kansas City to not make mistakes way more than I do trust Philly. We talked about it before the conference championship games. Kansas City has gone on an unbelievably long streak without turning the ball over. That streak did come to an end in the AFC Championship game against the Bills, but that was an unforced turnover where there was just an issue with the exchange between Mahomes and whoever the running back was on that play. It wasn't something that Buffalo did. So if you're not able to consistently force turnovers on this KC team, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Philly to win, because that has been what has allowed them to have such a dominant run, including these playoffs. Just look at their 3 playoff games. They caused multiple turnovers against Green Bay, including the opening kickoff. They got a couple of interceptions on Jordan Love. They had multiple takeaways in the second half against Stafford and the Rams, including a forced fumble on Stafford. That was huge. And then they just completely dominated Washington in the NFC championship game, causing multiple fumbles against Washington's offense and special teams. That really helps set them up to be in advantageous situations. And if you're not going to get that against Kansas City, which you just 100% cannot count on, because these guys do not turn the ball over, it's going to be much harder for Philly, I think, to have an advantage in this game, have a lead in this game, which is where they're most comfortable in. And I just feel like there's going to be situations in this game where Philly is going to be trailing, which is not something they've had to deal with during the playoff. And it's just, unlike Kansas City, who I trust implicitly to do whatever needs to be done when they're trailing, I cannot say the same for Philly right now. So I just think by the smallest of margins, smallest of edges, got to lean towards Kansas City because they've proven it when it matters the most. So I'm just going to take them -1.5, which is just such a short line that you have to take them though to win this game outright, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, it totally makes sense because, like you said, I think that turnover battle is going to be absolutely crucial. Whoever wins that will, I think, come away with this because
Yes.
you're 100% right. Kansas City rarely commits unforced errors. We had that one where they put the ball on the ground last in the AFC Championship game, but frankly, again, like you said, not something that the Bills forced. And to be able to be in that situation, you need to force Mahomes to be uncomfortable. You need to force him into tough situations, which can be a little bit difficult. Philly might be slightly more equipped to do some of those things because they like to get home with 4, drop 8 into coverage, and play aggressively on the back end. And they have some of the bodies up front to actually still get home and get pressure. And that can be good because when you have really smart quarterbacks like Mahomes, as soon as he gets some sort of sniff of the blitz or you sending extra pressure, he's just throwing it right behind you hot. And you really can't do much about that as a coordinator or as a defense. That's just part of the call. And they have to, they just have to produce. They just have to execute and make that happen. So what you do have to see is them come away with some sort of turnover. It's probably going to come in a very crucial, tight window. I don't expect the lead in this game to get really wide in any facet for either team. So this is going to be one that I definitely agree with you that it could be very close. This might be a game that you go in there and bet the live line heavily, depending on which way it's starting to lean and how you feel like the game is going. If you feel like the moment might be too big for Philly, then don't go in on a money line like I am. Or if you get in there and they're like, hey, 12 players on Philly have the flu, like, you're like, probably not. So I completely see where you're coming from with there. It does make a lot of sense. And, you know, like you said, too, I think you said, you talked about the half, right?
Well, that's one of my favorite plays for this game is taking the second half spread. KC, their same spreads, KC -1.5. And this is just a situation where in the big game, Kansas City dominates in the second half. And their 3 Super Bowl wins, they have outscored their opponents in the second half by at least 7 points in each of those 3 wins. Combined score differential in the second half of 31 points in their 3 Super Bowl wins. So, you know, they are just phenomenal in the third and fourth quarters, especially the fourth quarter. That's when Mahomes does his best work. So similar situation here where I feel like, especially if Kansas City does find themselves trailing in the second half, they're going to be poised to, you know, win the second half outright. So like the full game spread, KC -1.5, and second half spread, KC -1.5.
You know, that makes sense. It was something that we talked about. I keep wanting to say last week in the conference championship 2 weeks ago. It's something that we talked about because they've been doing that pretty much all year, and they've been doing that well in the playoffs as well. So I completely agree with you. And it's something that we talked about just a minute ago. And that was the script of how the last time these two teams met in the Super Bowl went. 24-14, Philly lead at the half, and it just crumbled away. And it's because a guy like Patrick Mahomes locks in the third quarter. So definitely get that with you there. It makes a lot of sense. Something else that we can go into here is when we talk about it is props. Props are a really good way to diversify what you're betting on in the big game, as opposed to just going straight to the game line. Especially if you watch us at all, a lot of times with these really heavyweight matchups, we don't quite so much lean in terms of, you know, oh, this team's definitely going to cover -1 or -2. A lot of the times, especially during the season, we just say, hey, sit back, bet a prop here, and just enjoy the ride because it's going to be a good game regardless. And a lot of the times that happens with the Super Bowl and the playoffs and things like that because it's really high-end teams going at it. So one of the places that you can look, especially since, you know, V and I fall on the different sides of the scale for this one. One of the things you're going to want to look at is some of the props. There's a lot of value in props that we're going here. All this list here, courtesy of our friends over at Betting Pros. Big shout out to Betting Pros. You can really get into a variety of markets here, but something that I'm targeting specifically that I do really like here is a Kareem Hunt anytime touchdown. You can get it at about +145. And the big reason why is because when this team gets into goal to go situations, they really like to feed Kareem Hunt. They've given him the most carries on the team by a wide margin in goal to go situations. And that even is post the Isaiah Pacheco injury. And he's had 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. 3 of them came in goal to go situations. If this Kansas City team marches their way down the field and they find themselves very close to the goal line, you can expect multiple carries to Kareem Hunt. And he's a guy that just possesses really, really good vision. One of the things that, even when running backs age, this is something we talk about a lot when we talk about scouting running backs on this show. The biggest thing for backs is something that we can't quite quantify, and it's vision and contact balance. And that's something Kareem Hunt, even in his advanced, I shouldn't say advanced age, that makes him sound like he's ancient.
Right.
Even as he's getting a little longer in the tooth, he is still fantastic in that aspect. And he has been playing excellent for them down the stretch. So that's one that I'm really liking here. V, what other props are you kind of looking at here?
Yeah, I got a handful here. We can start with, I like Patrick Mahomes to go under 252.5 passing yards. This one might seem a little strange given, it's Mahomes. He can throw the ball as good as anybody, but this number is a tad high given the defense he is playing and given, just his usage so far in these playoffs and 2 playoff games so far this year. He is a combined 34 completions on a combined 51 pass attempts. So he has not thrown the ball very often in these playoffs. And in both games, he went under this number of 252.5. Many of his pass attempts are turning into scrambles. He has 18 rush attempts in 2 games, which is quite high for Mahomes. Obviously he's a very good runner, but he is not known as a running quarterback or a quarterback who gets designed runs. Also going up against a Philly D line that could cause quick pressures, and those quick pressures lead to throwaways. So even if he gets a few more attempts, if some of those turn into throwaways because there's too much pressure barreling down on him, then obviously those will not lead to passing yards. Philly allowed the 6th lowest completion percentage in the NFL this year during the regular season at 62.2%. They've improved during the playoffs and have only allowed a 60% completion percentage in their 3 games of the playoffs so far. So definitely liking the under at 252.5 for Mahomes passing yards.
Yeah, and to just secure what you were saying there, what we're looking at here is he's had 10 scrambles. He's been sacked 6 times in the playoffs. And a lot of that, too, is because I think in some cases he doesn't trust all of his receivers to be, as polished as he is in that factor. And
Right.
he's had a few drops that have kind of come in some situations, not super clutch situations where they had to have it. They tend to get those ones. But he's had some that have, kind of left them, wanting a little bit more. Another one that I was seeing in this one too, when we talk about, Mahomes' ability and the defense with Philly, in something I alluded to slightly earlier, is that you can go ahead and go get largest lead of this game to be under 13.5 points at a smooth -110. That's a
nice.
really good value. This is a bad blood matchup. Even though these teams don't really play each other that often, any team that you face in the Super Bowl and you get a chance to go back there and right or wrong, you better believe that this Philly team is going to be angry. And we've already talked about how poised and polished Mahomes and the Chiefs are in pretty much every facet. So that's something that this is going to be a tightly contested matchup. And the big thing, 2 of the top rated defenses in the league this year, 1 and 2. So frankly, it's going to be a defensive battle. I think points are going to be a little bit harder to come by. Like you said, this is a very reminiscent Super Bowl of last year's, where the 49ers had a great defense and this game still ended up under even in overtime. So I think 48.5 is too high. And when we manage that in there, I think you're also seeing an under 13.5 in the largest lead category there. What else are you targeting here, V?
I'm also liking Xavier Worthy over 54.5 receiving yards. He has become a big part of this offense recently. He's gone over this number in 3 of his last 4 games. He's starting to get more and more looks, 7+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. He ranked in the top 15 in yards after catch per reception during the regular season at 6.9 yards after catch per reception. And again, if Philly's D-line gets quick pressure, Mahomes has a capability of dumping it down quickly to Worthy, and Worthy is so good after the catch that he's able to take these short passes and turn them into 10, 11, 12-yard gains. So if you can do that a handful of times and then get him down the field once or twice, this could be a very, very nice spot where you can get him at over 54.5 receiving yards. Very doable for a guy with his speed.
Very, very doable. He can go ahead and take one of those to the house in a lot of situations, and they get him going horizontally so that he can just outrun dudes to the corner and go. They use that a lot in the red zone, actually. He's actually gotten quite a few red zone targets and has come away with some touchdowns off some really clever play designs and using his speed. So I completely agree. You can also, I think, get him at around 180 for an anytime touchdown potentially. So that might be another way to shop him. And we have some other ones, some novelties that I think I'm going to target with some Xavier Worthy later, some next gen stats, fastest player stuff. So we'll get into that one here in a minute. Another receiver that I'm liking on the other side of the ball, though, is AJ Brown. It's something that we've talked about a little bit. AJ Brown is absolutely lights out against man coverage. And this is a defense that plays a ton of man coverage. On the negative side, though, he's going to be doing battle with Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie is the #1 rated corner in advanced coverage grade. He was fantastic all year. They moved him to the outside, and he's been stellar. So one of the things that I do see, though, that I think is going to be a key for this team getting off to a good start is going to be feeding AJ Brown early and often. So what you could do is you can go ahead and get him for over 10.5 yards in the first quarter at -110. And for me, the big thing is that Brown features heavily in Philly's opening script in their first 15 plays. Yeah. And he absolutely lights out against man coverage. That's what Kansas City is going to run a ton. And I think they're really going to put Trent McDuffie to the test early and see if that's going to be somewhere they can pick on later in the game. If they don't feel like that's an advantageous matchup for them, because frankly, in a body type situation, that is an advantageous matchup. Yeah. AJ Brown is going to be an advantageous matchup versus probably about 90% of corners in the league today, just because of his pure size and his ability to play through contact. So I would definitely see how this one's going to go. I'm liking him at over 10.5 yards on the first quarter for a guy who routinely catches 15-yard gains, one of the highest rates of explosive catches in the league. I think that's a shoe-in. He can get that on one catch potentially.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, especially like it early, because you do see that a lot where they feed Brown early and then they seem to go away from him later on, maybe because they're giving the ball more to Barkley. But to go off of that one, I'm going to take the other receiver in Philly, Devontae Smith, and take the over on his receiving yards at 51.5 yards. A lot of reasons similar to yours, because if McDuffie is so focused on Brown, that leaves Smith on the other side to go up against whoever their other corners are over there in Kansas City. And Smith has done a really good job in his career against this Kansas City team, against Steve Spagnuolo. In 3 career games against Kansas City since entering the league, Smith has at least 99 receiving yards in all of those games and at least 6 receptions in each of those games. This includes the Super Bowl a couple of years ago where he had 6 for 99. So he does a really good job against this defense. And again, I expect Philly to be trailing at some point in this game, especially late in this game. So more passing opportunities for that offense, meaning more potential opportunities for Smith to make some catches. So definitely like him at over 51.5 receiving yards.
And that does make a whole lot of sense. I think he's going to get Jalen Watson in this one, which is another funny thing, because Jalen Watson might be one of the corners that is big enough and aggressive enough to stick with AJ Brown. It'll be interesting to see their matchups. Obviously, you're going to put Trent McDuffie on him because he's just been lights out all season long. But it will be one of those things that it does create a sort of mismatch for both Eagles receivers, because Jalen Watson just can't really quite keep up, because if he doesn't get hands on you, it's kind of if he's even, he's leaving type thing. So I definitely agree with you there. Going over to the running game, you talked about Saquon Barkley. What can we say? What can we say? Saquon's been fantastic. He's 30 yards from breaking Terrell Davis's all-time both regular season and postseason rushing record. He's just been phenomenal. And I think if you want to lean into that, you can't really take any of his normal lines, because betting over 128 or whatever it is right this very second rushing line, actually it looks like it's dropped just a little bit over time, because of course people are probably hammering it under on 115 plus yard rushing line. But if you are in the mood, what you could do is there's a couple little parlays that I have for Barkley's, a couple that I like here. So one that I think is a shoo-in is him to go over 21.5 carries. He has just absolutely been the engine that runs this Philly offense. And they have given him more than that, a number of carries, all but twice since like week 11. So he's been phenomenal. He gets the ball a ton and he does a lot with the ball. And really, it's because of that offensive line. That offensive line is phenomenal. Saquon is excellent. He is fantastic. But this offensive line gives him so much room to work with. One of the best road grading offensive lines in the league. They're going to get Cam Jurgens back, who I believe is okay after the back injury. But something else you can go into is 2+ touchdowns. That's plus 260. If you go in 21.5 carries, that's minus 100. Or I have one more for you. I call it the birthday Barkley parlay because as it turns out, on Super Bowl Sunday will be Saquon Barkley's 29th birthday. And so much is to be said about running backs that turn 29. But frankly, I don't think Barkley is included in that group because he is phenomenal. He has not shown any signs of slowing down. He honestly looks like he's just getting started. If we look at an alt rushing line for him at plus 150, or at over 150, excuse me, that's plus 180 on the odds. And if you go an alternate line at 3 touchdowns, just for birthdays, obviously this one's a little bit more of a long shot. Take it with a grain of salt. Plus 1,600 on that. You can get plus 2,500 if you parlay those together. Now, obviously, take that for what it is, and we constantly tell you guys not to parlay things. So this is one of those fun Super Bowl special bets that you're probably not going to do in any of the other games. And you're definitely not going to hear us telling you to bet on those in any other games. So that's another one that I'm liking. V, I know you have one more Eagle you're targeting for a player prop here. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, last one for me, Dallas Goedert on the over 49.5 receiving yards. He has also been a big part of this offense lately. He's gone over this number in 3 of his last 4 games. He's averaging 12.5 yards per reception and 5 receptions per game during the playoffs. So if he continues those numbers, he's going to get to over 60. So definitely like that. Dalton Schultz against the same Kansas City defense in the divisional round had 64 receiving yards, and then Dalton Kincaid should have gone over this number in the AFC Championship game if he could have caught that last one that hit him in the hands. Unfortunately, that one hit the ground, so he did not go over, but definitely think this is a very doable number for Dallas Goedert.
Definitely agree. And I mean, they're going to probably need him to pick it up. They're going to need him to kind of play a pivotal role, especially on 3rd down when they do need to convert, that it's not 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2. They're really going to need to find him in some key spots there. So definitely agree with you as well. But we get to go on to some other props here. Not so much some player props, but some props in the game. And one that we're first going to talk about here is MVP. PV. There's a lot of good names on this list. We have Patrick Mahomes at the top, plus 115. Right behind him, Saquon Barkley, plus 250. Jalen Hurts, plus 350. Kelsey is kind of where it drops off there, plus 1,600. And then we have guys like Xavier Worthy, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Kareem Hunt, Chris Jones, Hollywood Brown, Jalen Carter, Zach Bond, and the works. Out of the list, out of all of the guys that are proven to be key contributors on this team, on these teams, who are you liking to potentially take home the MVP?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the 2 captains on Kansas City because obviously that's the team who I think is going to win this game. So obviously, start with Mahomes. Quarterbacks win this award more often than anybody else, especially in recent years. I think in each of the 3 championships for Kansas City, Mahomes has won MVP all 3 times. So I would expect the same trend to continue in this one. But if you want a little bit of a longer shot, got to go with Chris Jones, big man in the middle. Love to take a big defensive lineman who can really affect and change the game if needed, especially late. I could see him getting a huge stack on Jalen Hurts late in the game that really cinches the game for them, and they give him the award. So that's my long shot play, but definitely going to take Mahomes as the favorite in this one just because, quarterbacks always get this award.
And getting Mahomes at plus 115 almost seems like stealing, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense because if you're going to have Kansas City as the favorite in this game, Mahomes, he is technically the favorite to win this award because he has better odds than everybody else. But the fact that you're getting him at plus money, it's almost a 25-30 cent difference between Kansas City minus 1.5 and Mahomes to win this award. So there's definitely value there, I think.
Exactly. And I think if you want to go in terms of leaning into the Saquon Barkley being the engine that could in this game, getting him at plus 250 is kind of a deal there as well. And
It's
another
interesting,
target,
though, that he has shorter odds than Jalen Hurts. That is very fascinating. I wonder when the last time a quarterback had longer odds than one of his teammates to win
that's
MVP.
actually a really, really good question and an interesting one for sure. I would bet to imagine that not very often, and it's probably been a very, very, very long time since that, because it's not often that you have, especially in the modern NFL, if you're not really passing the ball at a really, really, exceptional rate, you're not usually making it into this game. You kind of fall short in one of the games that you really have to have along the way. But they've just played really well. They're really built for it as well. Another thing, just to hit on kind of what you were saying, I love your pick for Chris Jones. Another one that you might go into is a guy like Zach Bond, because we talked about this being an extremely tight defensive matchup. If we go back to some of the times that defenders have won the MVP, they've been off of games where, both offenses were like, okay, and they, sit there and go, well, this was a defensive game. And they kind of pick out one person who was just absolutely a game changer on defense. If Philly ends up winning, a really good chance is that that's Zach Bond. Maybe Zach Bond gets an interception. Maybe he forces a fumble. He's one of the best linebackers in the league. He was one of the top 5 finalists for the Defensive Player of the Year award. This is a guy that is a proven playmaker. And it's so funny because we talked about this early on in the season. Who is this guy? Well, he's a name on the map now, and he's about to enter free agency and make a whole lot of money. And a big game for him in the Super Bowl is almost like cashing him in even more. So I would definitely sprinkle a few dollars there, sprinkle a few dollars in some of the other spots that you're leaning. Something that we talk about a lot when it comes to markets like this, multi-option markets. When you have more than one player available, there's no reason you shouldn't be sprinkling a little bit of your budget in multiple different spots. Say if you're really thinking Kansas City is going to take this one, we already talked about how Mahomes is even a value here at plus 115. You should be putting a nice chunk, a few units even, on Mahomes to do that, whatever you're budgeting, and then go and sprinkle a little in some of the other options. So you're safe and you're secure no matter who ends up taking the award. These markets are specifically made for stuff like that. So play it smart. Don't play it hard. Another thing we can talk about in game props here. Successful 2-point conversion, V. I like it. I like it. You can get it at plus 180. I think that's a pretty decent price, especially in the modern game. More and more teams are going for 2, even when the analytics of it all is only slightly leaning towards stuff like that. But you always see the more modern take on when to go for 2 kind of be more prevalent throughout the league. A lot of the times, if you're down 14, they tell you to go for 2 on your first score so that on the next score, you either are tied or you can win it with a field goal. Or if you fail your first 2-point conversion, you can get it back in the next one. And we're talking about a successful 2-point conversion here, which I think is a key. You have a team like the Eagles who have, I don't know, the trump card of goal line plays or of needing 1 yard, like do the tush push. We saw how terrified the Commanders were. And if I can just say something for a second, the fact that the refs can think that, no, I don't care if you think you can award a score. They were never going to award a score in a playoff game. I call BS on that. And that's honestly, I've been watching this game for years, never once heard of that rule. Never once.
No. I think the only good thing was that the clock was running. So even if they did continue to do it, eventually the game would have ended. But imagine if the clock had been stopped on the previous play and they just kept doing it over and over again and we just never lost time. That's when the issues arise.
Yeah, no, exactly. So anyway, I think that if you look at what they have and then you look at the offensive play caller that you have in Andy Reid, a 2-point conversion, we're really talking about a team that needs 2 yards. I think both of these teams can get 2 yards at will. So
yeah, and I also think this makes sense because one thing that I was looking for but I couldn't find was a missed extra point for Jake Elliott. If anybody finds odds on that, let me know because I think that's something I would like to bet on because he has missed his fair share of extra points. And if that same thing occurs in this one, that's going to create a weird score situation, which also leads to more 2-point conversion attempts and then conversion. So definitely behind you on that one.
100% agree. And that'll lead into the next one, V. A little bit more of a question. An octopus. For anybody at home who does not know what the octopus is, I don't blame you. It's very poorly named. I can't believe that is the best name we can come up for somebody who scores a touchdown and a 2-point conversion.
But we got 8 hands. Got to go with
it. Got to go with it. So we have an octopus here. We have minus 2,500 at no. So obviously, the odds makers are leaning towards a no. We're at plus 1040 for a yes. I think that considering what we said with the 2-point conversion situation, I think that you could lean potentially towards an octopus. Now, again, this is one of those things that is just kind of fun Super Bowl type things. Sprinkle a few dollars in on it, have some fun with it. When it cashes, you're excited. If it doesn't, it's not going to kill you. But the same thing goes with the 2-point conversion situation. I think you have a scenario where you have two teams that are really, really, really good in goal-to-go situations. And if we look at a team, again, like the Eagles, what's stopping the Eagles from getting on the one, handing the ball to Saquon, he scores, and then handing it back to him, and he hits the 2-point conversion? Or even more likely scenario, they get on the one, they do the tush push, get in the end zone, line right back up, and do it again. That is very, very common in the Eagles' play calling, and I think that they're a team that's more situated to do such a thing. Anything else you're seeing on that, V?
No, they did it literally 2 years ago. Hurts got a successful octopus in this game 2 years ago. So if there's ever a time to take the yes, it is when Philly is playing in this game. So, definitely leaning towards the yes.
And speaking of the last time, the next one on the list here, V, the Philly special. Does Philly run the Philly special?
What is the strict definition of running a Philly special? What needs to occur for this to count as a Philly special?
I wonder, what do you think?
Is it just somebody other than Jalen Hurts throwing a pass or Jalen Hurts having to catch the pass?
I think it has to be a non-quarterback receiving the snap.
Okay.
And throwing to the quarterback. I think that's probably what the key definition would be for it. But you know what? That's a good question. And honestly, something that has to be said when we talk about these betting markets for things like when you bet, how long is the national anthem? Trust me, those are not smooth bets because the house will literally be like, oh, what do you mean it was 50, or what do you mean it was 2 minutes or 1 minute and 59 seconds? No, it wasn't. It was 2:01, and they'll say it was over.
So. Not only will they limit the amount that you can bet, they will also try to find any loophole to not pay you out, even though it's not going to cost them anything. So everything's working against you on these kind of things.
Exactly. So if you also fall in the line of thinking Philly might play the Philly special, you can get them at plus 3,300 as well. You can go and shop around for things like first team to run a trick play, a team to score on a trick play. Does a quarterback catch a touchdown? Does a non-quarterback throw a touchdown? Does a non-quarterback throw a pass? So whatever your factor flavor is, you can go in, shop around, and find some of these novelties, find some of these game props, have a little bit of fun with it. So make sure you guys go and shop around for some ones you think are fun. Which brings me to my next one, V, which is one that I think is fun. We have a next gen stats. I was super excited to see some books were offering next gen stat lines. So we have one here that I thought was really, really cool. That would be an interesting bet. And one that I thought was an extreme value here. Fastest ball carrier per next gen stats. At the top of this list, V, I was shocked. It's Saquon Barkley at plus 180. Right behind him, Xavier Worthy at plus 300. The guy who literally broke the record for the 40-yard dash is underneath a 29-year-old running back. Let that sink in. Jalen Hurts follows up behind Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Hollywood Brown, Isaiah Pacheco. So Jahan Dotson somehow. I mean, you got to get the ball to be the fastest offensive ball carrier, but that's neither here nor there. V, are you leaning with me? Xavier Worthy here at plus 300?
That was the first name. Well, it wasn't the name that jumped out. It was the name that I was literally searching for because it was like, when I see fastest ball carrier, you want to take the guy who broke the record. So I'm going to take Xavier Worthy here. I think Hurts is also an interesting one. I think against the Rams a few weeks ago on that long one, I think he was also running quite fast. So that's very interesting. And I think maybe Devontae Smith, if he's able to get a long one, he could get some speed under there. So those are some guys I'd rather take than Barkley on this one.
I think the big thing about Barkley on this one and why they probably lean to it is that he's probably the most likely to get a breakaway. Like he's the most likely to have room to run because he feels like he has room to run every single week to just break one open. And it really just depends on if anybody catches him. So that's where I go to. But the same thing, if Xavier Worthy can get down the sideline, lights out, that's a winner. At plus 300, that's just value you can't have anywhere else.
For sure.
Oh, actually, speaking of, I didn't even realize I put it on here in my notes. Will a non-quarterback throw a touchdown? And you can get that at plus 500. No at minus 900. I don't know why anybody would take the no anyway. They might as well not even shop it. But same thing goes. Just you have some teams. They're going to get creative in the red zone. Anything else we need to hit on that one, B?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably lean away from this one. I don't think in any of the 4 times previously that Kansas City has been here, somebody else other than Mahomes is throwing the ball. So I don't think they're going to do it. And I really don't think I've seen Philly do it either. So I just doesn't feel like these are the teams who like to do that. But I guess you could have said the same thing about San Fran last year. I don't think anybody was expecting Juwan Jennings to throw that pass. So could happen, but probably not something I would want to bet on.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something about big games, I think. Big games just always be the ones that are like, coaches just seem to. The Lions just the other day ran right before getting knocked out. They ran 5 trick plays. Like I've never seen a team run more trick plays.
I think it all started with Antoine Randall all those years back in the Super Bowl against Seattle. When he did it, it felt like every single year a coach wanted to do the same thing because it worked out so well for them.
Ever since setback play calling for decades. And the last one in our game props. Does this game go to overtime? We have at plus 700, yes. Minus 1,600, no. V, what's your read on that one?
Well, I did say at the top that I feel like this game is very similar to last year's game against San Fran. So that one went to overtime. I could see this one doing the same thing. Again, odds aren't great when you're getting plus 7 on the yes and minus 16 on the no. It's just not the best value, I feel like. Those are very different numbers. So, but I mean, yeah, it's not a bad idea to maybe just throw a couple bucks on the yes just because this is going to be a very, very tight game. It would be very surprising if this ends up being a multi-score game.
I love that you said that too. It always is so funny because we shop lines all year long and you never see lines that are quite outlandish like this, but you never see lines that frankly just go against each other in terms of implied probability. Like
they should be adding up to 100, but they just rarely do because the house always has to have an edge.
Right. And here they're making sure they get their edge off everything because nobody's betting a no at minus.
There's no other option. The game will either go to overtime or it won't. There is no third thing. So the fact that this is not adding up to 100 should tell you all you need to know. This is a hard business. Betting is a hard thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Now on to the fun ones, V.
Let's do it.
My favorite ones. We're going to talk about the Gatorade color. And anybody who watches this show knows I love the Gatorade color. But it's okay. I usually wax poetic about the Gatorade color, but I will be honest with you. The Kansas City Chiefs burned me last year.
Jeez.
And you know what? I like it.
Fueling your fire.
It means that they know that people bet on this. So let me just take you guys through this. All right. I'm going to give you all the typical spiels. It's never blue unless it's Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the only person in the entire NFL that likes the blue Gatorade. Okay. So we can take blue off the list. Clear water is always strong because no matter how many jugs of Gatorade, some of them are filled with water. And you have to put into account that they could potentially grab the water or grab the Kool-Aid or the Gatorade, and it could go from there. The big thing that we have to take into account is that in the AFC Championship game, both this year and last year, the Chiefs dumped orange Gatorade. But in the Super Bowl, they dumped purple. Why did they dump purple, you ask? Well, V, if you think back to the odds last year, purple was a smooth plus 900. It was the longest odds of anything. In the proliferation of betting and how big betting has become, I am not putting it past anybody on either of these staffs to just be a little bit of a troll. So I think you could take whatever the longest odds one is, sprinkle a little bit on it, take clear, sprinkle a little bit on it, and you're good to go. So
those assistant coaches don't make a ton of money. So if they want to skew the odds a little bit, makes sense to me.
It only makes sense. So with that being said, here are the odds for Gatorade color to be poured on the winning head coach. Lime, green, or yellow, the worst flavor of Gatorade, is minus 175. Purple, having been last year's color, is next behind at plus 300. After that, orange at plus 350, red at plus 500. We already talked about blue. Blue is the longest one this year. So you actually do have a bit of a conundrum because normal people don't like blue. So blue plus 700 and beautifully clear plus 1200. I'm going to continue to hammer clear as always. And then I'm probably going to lean a little bit on red or maybe even orange just because I don't think people like red. Orange or red. I think those are strong. And no, I don't really care if it's the Eagles or if it's the Chiefs because I don't think taste buds care what color your team wears. So, frankly, there we go with that. V, what color Gatorade are you betting on?
I'm going to go with the red. I feel like, purple was the color of the Super Bowl logo last year, right? So maybe that's why they had purple. And this year I think it's red. So I'm just going to take a little red on this one.
You know what? I like that. Yes. I like your style there. The next one we have on the list here, V. I'm happy that they made this a line. The Drake curse. The Drake curse. What team apparel will Drake be wearing on Super Bowl Sunday? Kansas City is minus 170. Philly is plus 130. V, which side do you think Drake's going on?
Can I pick a third option and say neither? Because why would he even be watching the game? This whole game has been designed to torture him with Kendrick in the halftime show. If he watches this game, then this man has no shame, no self-dignity. I don't think he's watching this game, so I don't think he's going to be wearing either team's jerseys. If there's a third option that I can take, I'm going to take that one.
You know what? And I think you make a good point because I think today's Friday. Yeah. Usually we've already gotten news of like some outlandishly large
seven-figure bet that he's placed.
That he's completely okay losing because he's lost essentially every single bet that he's ever placed on a championship game ever. So yeah, I think you're right there with you. Honestly, you're a glutton. He's a glutton for punishment if he watches this game, frankly, because this is all about Kendrick Lamar. And, you can get a bunch of Kendrick Lamar lines too. I couldn't find any great ones. There was really the only one that I was able to find when I was shopping at this very moment was what's the first thing he says when he comes out? Like, yo, New Orleans, what's up?
Yeah, I think New Orleans, what's up is probably the first thing.
Yeah, and then there was like the longest odds was Drake. It was like, okay. So,
that's not happening.
I mean, we'll see what's going to happen. I don't know. You could go probably find some of the odds on what's the first song he's going to play. I know that I saw one that was like potentially first song he was going to play, the best odds were All Right or no, what was it? Humble. It was Humble.
Yeah.
So potentially, but I couldn't find the rest of the song list and the odds on that one. So you'll have to go find it. If you guys do find it, go ahead and tweet it at me at PFF_Mace, and I'll be happy to bet it too. So the next one, though, we always got to have one of these. We had it last year too. Number of times Taylor Swift was shown on the broadcast. And I'm pretty sure the line was the same last year. 6.5. And Oddsmakers have a pretty good line here. They're at -115 for both sides. V, you might have to jog my memory, but I feel like we had 4 in the first half of last year's game. And then we had 1 in the second half, like right at the end.
Yeah.
But I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I believe it did go under. But V, which way are you leaning on this one? Are they going to show
a very important note underneath this ticket saying that it says how many times shown on the broadcast. So initially I was going to take the over because I would have assumed that the broadcast includes the championship ceremony at the end. And if you think Kansas City is going to win like I do, then obviously you're going to see her and Travis, hugging and whatever after the game, which I would have thought would have counted. But they make a note that this only is for opening kickoff till the end of the game when it hits zeros at the end of the fourth quarter or overtime. So if that's the case, I'm actually going to be leaning towards the under because it just feels like too many times. 6.5 feels like 4 or 5 is the right number, especially because it feels like there has been somewhat of a backlash. I don't know how much the NFL cares about that, or maybe they're just going to lean in. But either way, under seems right if we're not including the championship ceremony and the trophy celebration afterwards. So I'll take the under in that case.
Well, and it's old news. It's old news. They've been dating for over a year. We were at the same situation last year. We've had T Swift for 2 seasons. She's a natural in the NFL now, So
for sure.
I completely agree with you. I think under 6.5. Frankly, it becomes a pregame and a postgame thing more than anything. And I think that's 100%. What you hit a nail on the head there. So completely agree with you there. And V, that does it.
It does it.
That's the last one of the year. That wraps us up for the Super Bowl, y'all. It's been an incredible season. I just want to first off thank my partner, Vishaal Gupta, who literally is the engine that makes this show go. Just like Saquon Barkley is the engine that makes the Eagles offense go. For real, if you guys aren't following V, go do it. He is brilliant. He is one of the greatest minds in football right now, and I do not say that lightly. I do not say that lightly. I do not say that because he's sitting next to me here. I say that because I truly believe it. He is fantastic at what he does. Make sure you guys go give him a follow. Make sure you show him a lot of love. V, it's been an amazing season, brother. I am so happy that I get to do this with you. I'm so happy that Steve and Neil gave us the keys to do this show. It's been a phenomenal ride. I have so much fun every time we get to go live. So for real, thank you, partner. It's been an amazing, amazing ride and another amazing season with you.
Thank you so much. I reciprocate all of those same feelings. It's been a blast. I think this technically concludes year 4 of this show. I'm trying to think back. I feel like the first big game we did was the Tampa Bay Kansas City Super Bowl a few years ago, right after COVID. So I think this is a year 4 for us. It's just unbelievable how quickly time flies. But I had a blast again this year, and I cannot wait to do it all over again starting in September. It's going to be another fabulous ride with the 2 of us. So thank you. So much fun. So much fun doing this every week and being able to talk about this game that everybody loves.
Literally, we're just living the dream. So for real, everybody, thank you guys all for coming through every week, coming in, talking with us, hanging out with us. It's always been a blast, and I can't wait to do it next year. We're probably going to have some stuff over in the off season. So make sure you're in our Discord to stay tapped in with us. Follow us on YouTube, follow us on Twitch. That's where we're going to be really hammering content throughout the, duration of however long we're allowed to be doing this. ImportantNonsense.com. That's how you become a member. We're going to really hope to grow our Discord this year. So make sure you're in there and hitting us up. Also, all of our picks from tonight will be in the Discord, as well as maybe some more picks as we come in. Any more updates and information that we find, we're going to give it to you guys first in there. So make sure you guys hit us up in there. And until next time, you guys, good night. Good luck.